Okay, I'm not going to wait any longer. I'm just going to react to the damn thing. Ready? And what are you doing, Greg?
Welcome to the making of the Bazaar.
Excellent.
This week's topic is Dooley.
You knew it all along, Greg is a robot.
What really needed for Dooley was a central mechanic, something that the whole character is based around that feels unique and different. So we set every designer upon the task. We said next.
Every designer. This is what I was saying. They've been like cross-contaminating with each other's work. It's not just like, okay, Greg, you are doing Estelle. Eric, you are doing Jules. They're all working on things together to come up with a better thing.
Bring your best ideas to it. And this led us to a couple of core ideas that we thought would be pretty cool. For example,
are we going to see Dooley gameplay?
Someone said, hey, Dooley could have a heating up mechanic. Another suggestion was a functions mechanic, which said Dooley had a core, and when the core activated, it would trigger all the functions. And then there was a version where the core just accelerated all your items. So when Dooley's core triggered, it would just move everything up. And we also had a tech tree sort of version where the core had a bunch of different tech trees it could branch into.
So like this. So is the core going to be an item, or is the core just Dooley? And he has just like this passive ability. I guess Jules kind of has a passive ability, but so far all of the other unique mechanics have been like visible. So I guess, is it just going to be like a stat, like altitude? So is it going to be like, I don't know, core power or something?
In the end, we were left with two that we thought had the most potential. For Dooley's
click the button.
Core mechanic, Dooley starts with the core on his board. It'll be Dooley's first item instead of the basic item.
It is an item! I knew it would be a fucking item. I said it. Core Mark 1. Oh my god, so we are going to get like an upgrading Dooley, kind of. We weren't far away. We actually weren't far away. Excellent. And it's all about advancing. That's awesome. That's awesome.
And what other characters get. It deals a little bit of damage, and also advances the cooldowns on Dooley's other items. Then at the start of each day, you can upgrade the core. As you upgrade the core,
I love this animation,
the
by the way.
gets more powerful,
it's pretty.
And so does the damage. This isn't always free.
Dooley's Collective? Oh, is that just the name of his house? I bet it is.
But it makes the core more powerful.
Oh, upgrade your core. Oh, that's such a smart idea. So Dooley is a lot about like upgrading his core, which also helps his items like improve and stuff, rather than like getting stats and stuff.
And making this choice takes you down the path of Dooley's core is the main thing and driving his functionality. When you get the core to the highest level, it's really quite powerful.
Ooh.
So you have a core.
Wait, what's that? Is that lock symbol like you just can't sell it?
Mechanic in which
This means Dooley has less space to play with, right? So like unlocking board slots are super important. A large Dooley item is like a huge commitment, which means if you're playing a different character and you get a large Dooley item, it's less of a commitment. So it's good to get. Like there's so much.
Over the course of the game, and a heat mechanic, in which Dooley builds.
There actually is a heat mechanic.
Dissipates that heat somehow, and Dooley's other items check that heat level and have different results based on.
They did both of it.
It felt like a classic mecha game where you've got a lot of powerful things, but they build up a lot of heat, and if you don't manage that, you set yourself on fire.
Where was the heat? Where show me the stat.
These two builds, well, we kind of need to try them. This is where the pure thinking part of design had to end, and the practical part of trying things out for ourselves.
So you've played a lot of it?
At some point, you can't just theorize anymore.
And we can play it?
Play it a little bit and see how it feels to really make a final decision.
And we
so
can
the
play
next
it.
step is make them. But for a game like the Bazaar, you can't just make the mechanic. You have to actually make some items too, or else
That's
you can't really try.
Chunky
so
forklift.
To try each of these, we have to make the core mechanic itself, and we have to make a bunch of items to go with it. Not all the items for Dooley.
Oh, okay, so they're trying each of the... Right, okay.
So once we've done that, we'll pick one of the two directions.
They're trying core and heat. They're trying core and heat. They're not doing both. Whew. I was like, that's going to be a lot to manage for Dooley.
Or a heat-overheat type of mechanic.
Ooh, so we have two directions Dooley could be going in. We could be going heat and discharging your heat somehow. And we could be going the core mechanic. As a person who enjoys nerding about game design and stuff like that, as per my previous channel, I won't say the A word, it'll trigger Anton. The core mechanic sounds really intriguing because it brings up so many questions. Like I said, it changes how you have to think about your board because suddenly you have 2 fewer slots. Maybe there are ways to make the core smaller and yet keep it stronger. Do we have like a fancy core? Obviously you won't be getting different versions of it, but like my brain goes to the sniper rifle, right? where one of the fancy options was to make it smaller. That would be ideal for a core. How is it upgrading? Is it just giving you more advancement? Is it doing more damage? There are going to be a bunch of items that like cool the core, right? There'll be an item that maybe overcharges the core and like makes the core charge faster. There's so much that they could do. Anyway, yeah, the core thing, personally, I'm leaning that way. I think that's going to be so much fun. And if they do go that way, is Dooley going to take the place of Jules for me? I don't know. I think Dooley is going to be a happy second at the very least. And we haven't even seen Mac yet. So I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, oh, but if Dooley's a happy second, then Pygmalion, who I love most of the cards for, Pygmalion gets shoved down. So what does that mean for my ranking? And I was like, but wait, we still have another character to come. Anyway, we're getting ahead of ourselves. The heat mechanic also looks like it could be interesting. That looks a little bit more altitude-y, like we're going to be trying to balance some sort of number. So it's leaning more towards the high difficulty or like high skill floor. But I think the skill ceiling of the core could be ginormous. Because, like I say, you've got to think about so many other things. You're limited on your choices because of board space. And you're having to divert resources into upgrading your core as well as hunting for shinies and fancies or buying stats for your character, etc. Yeah, out of all of that, I forgot to bring up the fact that Dooley is going to be a shielding character. We've already seen a shielding Dooley card, but that was just one. That could have been the only one he had. Vanessa has a shielding card. She's not a shielding hero. But no, shielding is going to be supposedly quite prominent with Dooley. Which makes sense, right? He's made of metal. He is a little robot ball thing. So, you know, metal's quite strong. You can create quite defensive things out of metal. But we've also seen his ability to like project barriers and stuff, or from that one card that we've seen. So it makes sense that Dooley is quite heavy on the shielding. But we haven't seen much shielding yet. This also brings more relevance to things like the weapon that breaks through shields. I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head, but there is a weapon that breaks through shields very easily. It brings more relevance to that, right? Because 1 out of 6 characters is going to be heavy on shielding. Whether it's heat or whether it's core, he is going to excel in longer fights. The core was all about advancing items, which means you hit again and again and again. And the heat mechanic is something you're going to build up and then have to expunge somehow. I think the core mechanic will be not very high skill floor. I think it'll be easy to enter because it's very forgiving, right? The core is a stronger early item and advances other items you get, so it just naturally makes everything early on easier. But it's going to have a higher skill ceiling because it's restricting your choices. You have to put some resources into upgrading your core, or do you? You have to work with 8 slots instead of 10. Whereas the heat mechanic is going to be higher skill floor, kind of like Stell, because you're going to be managing a stat, as well as like managing your space on a board. And this is one thing that I really like that the Bazaar did. They made it very, very visual. Like, they made one of the biggest challenges in the game exceptionally visual, which is the board, right? You can only have as much on... you can only have as many cards as you can fit on your board. Traditional auto battlers, maybe with the exception of Hearthstone Battlegrounds, like TFT, Dota Auto Chess, Underlords, that sort of stuff, they don't have that benefit. You have a big space, but you have this arbitrary number in the back of your head that you have to think about fitting in. And then you have to think about, I need 3 of that, and I have this many bench spaces. What the hell is that? No, the Bazaar does away with that. It makes it spatial, it makes it physical, so you can see it and figure it out. So the core is a physical thing. It's a spatial thing. That's where the biggest skill problem probably comes in, I would imagine. Although we'll see. We don't. This is just guesswork at this point, speculation. That's a very spatial thing. That's an easier thing to grasp. Whereas one of the things that I think is going to be a problem with Stell, and why currently not enough people, well, not many people are liking her, is that it's an arbitrary number, right? Altitude. Sure, we all figured this out. We kind of assumed that altitude would be Stell's thing. but you've still just got to kind of do the maths. You've got to figure out a number that you can't physically see to play Stell well. And that might be the similar thing with Heat. So I feel like Heat might have a higher skill floor.